Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the 139th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode was brought to you by patrons Christopher Hall and Lucas Miller. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Unlow. Today we've got Mark Stolaroff. He's a prolific indie producer. He's done a ton of movies, but he specializes specifically in micro-budget filmmaking. He's got his own program called No Budget Film School, and he's distilled a ton of the tips and tricks and a lifetime of experience making micro-budget films from kind of the very beginning, before even mumblecore was a word. He was making those movies, and he's parlaying a ton of that experience into his latest movie, DriverX, which premieres November 29th. So probably just in time for you to check it out. If you are curious about making a no-budget movie, Mark is the man.
Yeah, and this is the guy that made a $3,000 film that got into Sundance. So he knows a thing or two about not just making cheap movies, but making movies that are effective in terms of getting into festivals, getting seen, getting known. There's a lot of really good tidbits about how he made DriverX and how I think our listeners can apply that to their own projects.
So I can't wait to hop into our conversation with Mark. We are going to forego our catch-up this week because we had so many awesome things that we don't want to cut out. So we're going to find out what Oren's been working on next week. But before we hop into our conversation with Mark, we have to talk about our Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/justshootitpod, you can subscribe a little bit of cash. It helps the show grow. It helps support things like our upcoming live event, December 5th at Sawhorse Productions. They'll be providing some pizza and stuff, but we'll still have to rent a bunch of chairs and other dumb stuff. We want to keep the show free and also the events free. So if you have a little extra scratch, if you're doing well, if the show has helped you out, or if you want to do the virtual equivalent to buying us a coffee to help us pay our editors, help us build the community, and help us throw more live events, go to patreon.com/justshootitpod.
And if people want to find out more about our live event on December 5th, what should they do?
They should go to justshootitpod.com/live.
Well, without further ado, let's talk to Mark Stolaroff. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Congrats on finishing another feature.
Thank you.
What number is this?
I don't know. It's the 5th I've done with Henry Burial, but I don't know how many, and I don't know how you count them at this point. Like, I mean, I've been a producer on a lot of them, and I don't know the number. I mean, starting back in the 90s. So,
but you're like a producer filmmaker.
The ones I do with Henry are like it's like me and Henry, and you bring a few people on here and there, and then it's mostly just me.
But you're like in the editing room, you're cutting, you're making.
Well, I'm not cutting, but I mean, once there, like for instance, on DriverX, there was no production department really. I mean, it was me. There was like we had a first AD for like 4 or 5 days, and when we were doing a lot of the driving stuff, I was the whole production department. I was media manager, I was second AD and doing call sheets, and I was
like literally like you're hauling the gear.
The very little bit of gear we had, yes, was in my apartment. Yeah, no, it's one of those, I like that kind of filmmaking where, you're doing a lot of different jobs and, that kind of thing. So yeah, for that, I've done five, I guess.
And for our listeners,
4 or 5,
hearing you say we have very little gear and it's a 2-man crew for 90% of the time. It sounds like maybe this is like a new thing you're doing, but you've been making feature films for like 20 years, right?
I've been in the business for over 25 years or something, but it's not always the same. So, I did, when I came out here in 94, came out to Los Angeles from Texas. I worked at Roger Corman's company and did, worked on these, whatever they were, $1.5 million in the production department, PA. I became a location manager the first week on the job. They like bumped me up to location manager. I'd never, I'd been on a film before, but not, had no idea. It was a pretty big location kind of a movie for 2 weeks of it. And so it's that's that trial by fire Corman stuff you do. And then, and I worked my way up, become like first AD, and I production managed a short film that won the Academy Award for Best Short back then.
What short was that, actually?
It was called My Mother Dreams the Satan's Disciples in New York. The worst title for a movie ever, but
I'm not sure where the punctuation lands on that one. But.
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, you can imagine like you calling people on the phone. Yeah, I'm with the film. My mother dreams of things as I'm on. Anyway, but yeah, it was a great film. It just a long title. So I was doing that kind of work then, and then in 1997, I came out here to be a director. I wanted to direct. I wanted to direct the next Clerks. I saw El Mariachi and Slacker and Clerks. I saw Clerks at the Houston Film Festival, and I went down and met the guys, and we went out for a drink, and I was like, I want to make that. I had $30,000. I can make that movie. I remember this vividly. I saw it, and I probably went because I probably read it was low budget, and I was really interested in doing that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the kind of films I made in college myself, or what you would call DIY. I did DIY theater for 5 years in Houston. I ran my own theater with a buddy that I grew up with, and it was all DIY. And so that's always been in my blood, I think. And then I saw that movie. They screened it on 16 millimeter, but they only had one projector. So after every reel, they would stop the film, and you'd sit there for like 10 minutes and talking to your whoever's next to you, and then they put the other reel on. And it was like an amazing,
incredible.
And it was amazing because every time
the reel is like 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, and every time the reel ended, everyone went, oh. And you could just feel the crowd loving that movie. And it was like, and it was a mistake. They didn't want it to be that way, but it ended up being kind of a fun way to watch that movie. And I just went, wow, I love this movie. It wasn't about the production value. It was, there was something going on there, the writing or whatever. I mean, it's a mix of like, kind of low budget elements that works. And I thought I can do that. I mean, we had done a play that we wanted to turn into a movie that we just never did, but it was very local, very specific. It was called The Outrageous Mr. Houston at this theater I had. And it was a huge hit for us. It was our very first play. And we, like, seat of our pants, wrote this thing while we were rehearsing it and whatever. And so I just thought that's what I wanted to do. And I came out to LA. I was going to be a no-budget film director when that was just starting to be a thing. And then I was at South by Southwest. I was back in Texas just visiting South by Southwest, and they announced this thing called Next Wave Films. And this gentleman named Peter Broderick it was his idea. He'd come up with this idea for a finishing funds company to give finishing funds to films like this, like Clerks. In fact, Kevin Smith and Robert Rodriguez were on, and Linklater were on the board of advisors for the company. And they announced this company, and IFC was financing it. And I'm like, that's the company. I want to work for that guy because they're giving finishing funds of movies I want to kind of make. And so I found him in the hallway and at the convention center in Austin. I gave him my resume, and I was the first person he hired.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah.
And it was great. That was really an amazing experience. I mean, 6 years. If you ever wanted to know what is it about especially a no budget or low budget film that people always ask, like, what are you looking for and all this stuff. And it's like, they think it's a genre or something like that. And it's like, I probably looked at 2,000, some part of 2,000 films myself. We as a company probably looked at 4,000 films in that time period, get like 40 a month. And so the thing that you end up saying that's what's important are things that people don't expect. It's not production values. It's like uniqueness is the number one thing we always tell people. And then it's like, directing talent, acting talent. It's not these other things, but we got involved with our first film was Pi.
Sure.
And we worked on that film for 4 months, and then the deal, we had signed like a short form deal.
This is Darren Aronofsky's Pi.
Darren Aronofsky's Pi. And then the deal fell through when they got into Sundance. The investors wanted to take it back, and then it became like a struggle, and we gave it back to them. And then we did Joe Carnahan's first film, Blood, Guts, Bullets, and Octane.
Yeah, sure. He's from Sacramento.
What was his first movie?
Blood, Guts, Bullets, and Octane. Right? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the order? Okay.
Yeah. $7,000 feature before we gave it finishing funds.
And that was also kind of like right when like Pulp Fiction was kind of a thing. So it was like, it
and
felt
that
like.
hurt it ultimately. I mean,
it did.
Because all of a sudden a bunch of stuff came out that was just like, Tarantino like, but it was really good. I mean, you could see he was talented. He was a great actor in it too, because he's like the lead in it. And then we did Chris Nolan's first film, Following, which I worked on for like 4 years, and did Amir Barlev's first film, a documentary called Fighter. We had a documentary called Sound and Fury that was nominated for Academy Award.
Is that about deaf people?
Cochlear implants.
Yeah, I watched that, obviously.
Yeah, it's a great, so we got involved with a lot of really great films and great filmmakers. And then that company shuttered in 2002. And I had one of the, not the last films, but one of the later films I had gotten involved with was a film called Somebody. And Somebody was before it came to us, was a $3,000 feature shot with a 2-man crew, like we were talking about earlier. 2-man crew, a director and DP on Canon XL1s. That was the crew. No sound person, no lighting, whatever. And the DP was also the editor and was the composer. And it was 3 people basically. Then the actress who was was really about her story was the other kind of filmmaker involved. 100% improvised. We looked at it. We thought it was terrific. It was 80 minutes long, and they probably shot 120 hours of footage. And by the time it got to us, it was 80 minutes or 70 minutes. No, we actually had them add footage, 10 minutes to it, and then we helped it get into Sundance. It got into dramatic competition in 2001. It had to be the lowest budget film ever to be in dramatic competition. It was the first digital film to be digitally projected at Sundance. And we sold it to Lot 47, and Lot 47 released it theatrically, and then they went out of business, so it was never released on video. And this is 4 years before Mumblecore, before anybody had said Mumble. And it was, classic Mumblecore.
No one had ever said the word Mumblecore before.
Never. And even when they did, they shouldn't have, because it's such a silly name. But this, but it was a really terrific movie. And so the director of that movie, Henry Burial, we worked together on that. I became a producer on that. And then after Next Wave closed, I was working with another gentleman that I met at Next Wave named Ron Judkins. We were going to start a company called Antic Pictures, and we were going to do a slate of micro-budget films, like $200,000 films. And had a business plan. We were running around looking for money. And then Henry, I'd heard that Henry had this feature that was in the Sundance Screenwriters Lab called True Love. And I went to a reading of it, and I thought it was terrific. It was just what he does really well. It's very authentic writing, great acting, the writing that's coming out of the actor. So like he did that in a kind of Mike Lee process. It was written, it wasn't improvised, but it came out of improvisations and then a written script. And
Wait,
so,
can you tell us real quick what's the Mike Lee process?
So in Somebody, they didn't ever write a word down ever. It was all improvised. If they wrote something,
like a guideline of what the story was,
they would have like an idea, and they play with it in the editing room for a long time they cut whole big chunks of stuff out in Somebody, but everything was improvised. So they would know kind of what they were, what the intent of the scene was. And these are actors that like to do it. A lot of they all went to Playhouse West. And so Mike Lee's idea is that you bring people in a room, and maybe you don't have a story at all, and you start, interviewing, which Henry likes to do. He likes to interview the actors and kind of bring out what things have happened in their life that might be interesting for a movie. And which is what they did on Somebody. And then
wait, so he doesn't even know what the movie's about.
When he made True Love, I may be wrong. I'm pretty sure he didn't have an idea of what the movie was. He put together a group of actors that he worked with, that he liked, that he thought were really talented, and he would interview them. They would workshop ideas, and then stories would emerge, and then he would start to write that dialogue down and start to form it into a script. And so we had that script. That script got into the lab. And then they had like $1 million or $2 million budget and had producers but they wanted to get the $2 million or whatever it was. They had to they were saying, well, we've got to recast the movie. I'm like, well, you can't recast the movie. These people,
this is their story.
They wrote the movie essentially in a sense, I should say. And so they said, well, we're never going to get the money. And they left the movie. And he was, upset about that. And I heard, I saw the reading, and he came to me and I said, well, let's make it for $50,000. I just made up I literally made up a number that I thought the 3 of us could put in 50. We could come up with 50 and put it in. And I'd seen the reading, so I had some sense of it. And I thought, well, this is doable. It wasn't even set in Los Angeles, and we had to rewrite it to be made on a smaller budget and to be set in Los Angeles. But it was a very ambitious film. It had a huge cast and a lot of locations, and he didn't want to shoot it 2-man crew like Somebody. He ran away from that style of filmmaking as soon as he was done. He wanted to make something more controlled, and we had a big crew. But my producing partner Ron, he's won 2 Academy Awards. He's been nominated 5 times for sound. He's a production sound mixer who does all the Spielberg movies. So we had a lot of great relationships, and we had a lot of people working for us with a tiny day rate, and we, I thought the movie True Love was a great movie. It didn't get into Sundance. It was really close. I know, talking to Cooper, and then it played some festivals. And then Henry came up with a new idea for a movie that while we were going to festivals with True Love, he pitched to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I really like that. And we were going to make that for a bigger budget, but we decided let's make that one let's just make it. Let's don't. It's going to take a million years to get $1 million. So we kind of rewrote it and made it, ourselves, putting our own money in, and that's just become kind of our thing. And so, Pig was that film.
Oh yeah, that's when I met you.
That's
you had just finished that, or it was just coming out at festivals or something.
Yeah, it came out earlier that year in 2011, and it premiered in Nashville. And then I saw you at the St. Louis Film Festival. So we played it there. But I played like almost 40 film festivals. It won 10 awards. It's kind of indie sci-fi, so it had won a lot of the sci-fi awards. And it got picked up by Kino Lorber.
And what was the concept for that?
It's about a guy who wakes up in the middle of the desert, like sand dunes desert, completely alone. He's got a hood on his head and his hands are tied behind his back. He wakes up and he's like, he has no idea how he got there. He doesn't know who he is. He has amnesia, has no idea who he is. And it's a mystery, basically, try to figure out. The only clue to who he is a name written on a piece of paper in his pocket that says Manny Elder. And he's like, well, is this me, or is this somebody that put me here, or whatever? And so it's this kind of solve this mystery. And it's a brain teaser kind of a thing, and I can't tell you the secret. Yeah. But it was, it was a fun movie, and then, Henry had been attached to a film called The House That Jack Built, but not the one that's about to come out, that was written by Joe Vasquez in the mid-'90s before he died. This is the Hang with the Homeboys director. And the producers had attached Henry right after somebody was at Sundance. And but they were trying to raise millions of dollars to make that film, and they could never get the money. And they saw Pig, and then they said, well, maybe we can come back and make it for something much, much, much lower. And so that was a film that I wasn't involved with originally. I was just helping him out. I was a production accountant, just saying, hey, if you need me to do that so you can save some money, because they were trying to get the budget down. And they were shooting in New York, and it was shot, and it was kind of a more traditional way of shooting, because we always shoot over long periods of time. That one was shot 18 days, if you don't get it, you don't get it kind of shoot with a normal size crew. But it was still very low budget. And then when they got into post, they had $0. So I was brought in originally just as a post-production supervisor and someone to kind of raise money. I raised money on Kickstarter, and then I became a producer. And basically kind of, because the producers were more step back kind of producers. They weren't like line producer type producers. And so then I, became a producer on House That Jack Built, which, premiered the LA Film Festival 2013, and then played a number of festivals, won a number of awards. That's on Netflix now. It got released through Vega Baby. And then right after that, we were working on a horror film that he'd been writing for a long time that was very clever. And it was one of those things where we had these investors. They were going to give us the money. We were like scouting locations. We had we had budgets. We had a line producer, the whole thing, and we were like waiting. Like there was a trip I was supposed to go, and I couldn't go because we were shooting this movie. And then the financing fell through, and then it was back up again, and then we were like, okay, it's going to happen. And then the financing fell through again, and this was like most of 2014. This was happening to us, and it wasn't a ton of money, but it was money that it was real money you had to raise. And so he has 2 young sons, and he's married. His wife works during the day, and he works. He does whatever he does, but he couldn't do a lot of the normal stuff he does to make a living because we were working on the film, and so he started driving for Uber at night, and and he was doing the night shift because he was taking care of his kids during the day.
Right.
So I'm up normally really late at night, and he would call me late at night, and he would tell me like, oh my God, you're not gonna believe what this person did or these people did or what they said. And I think it was pretty quickly on that we decided that there was a movie in that. And it was clear to me that it was a movie that we could do ourselves, finance ourselves, because, just without even a script, you knew the elements were going to be such that you could pull this off. And then of course, when you wrote the script, then you start to go, oh, okay, well, how are we going to do that? And how are we going to do this? But the kind of, critical mass of elements, the car and the house where you're shooting all the family stuff, the wife and the kids stuff. We knew we would shoot that at Henry's house, and we knew we would shoot the car stuff at Henry's car. And so That made up a big chunk of it. So,
what were some of the more challenging things, like financially?
So the biggest probably, some locations.
Or logistically even. Right?
Well, it's both. I think, so he had other locations and when I do a budget, it's like, I was doing this big, we were talking earlier about these bigger budget things that I've worked on. The going rate, I usually didn't know what the going rate for locations were. I just knew they were more than I could ever afford. But I've worked on some things in the last year and a half where I know what it costs now to legitimately rent a house or an office or something. And it's like, I don't know.
10 grand.
10 grand, maybe $2,500 a day if you're lucky on something. You can use Rappel or something and Gigster or something and find, but that's what you're paying thousands of dollars a day for anything. And so we have like these two different offices in the movie that it was like, okay, well, this is a really important scene, so I'm going to put down $500 because that's a lot of money for me, and I'm going to try to find this office for $500.
This is the nut, right? It's like the $500.
Yeah.
Right?
And then with this one, not as important, I'll write down $200, and then this one, we just got to get it for free because it's not so critical, And so it'd be that kind of a thing. We had a lot of different locations like that. But the big thing was we had 50 speaking parts, and acting is the most important thing to us. So we're going to be mostly using SAG actors. So that, that's a set rate. You can't get around that. So that's a
what's
decent
that, like $100 a day?
It was $100 when we started shooting, and then we shot over a long period of time. So it bumped up to $125. But the thing that is that that's not what it costs to,
Right, that's not including
fringes, and that's 8-hour days. So if you work people 12 hours, so I like to say the minimum is about $200 when you're if someone works 1 hour on your movie there, that's about $200 is the kind of ballpark way to think about how much.
I want to ask a quick question because you say you've been shooting over a long period of time. Describe that to us a little bit. Is it that you're shooting, like piecemeal, like you're picking things up here and there, and it's a nights and weekends thing, or is it when you say a long period of time? What do you mean?
It's different each time for different reasons. We end up doing this. I would prefer just to knock it all out in one period. For DriverX, the reason we shot over multiple periods is our lead actor Patrick Fabian, who's on Better Call Saul, was working on the show, and he was not in town all the time, and he couldn't tell us when he would be in town. They don't give you a lot of information. Sure. And so we shot for 5 days the house stuff, none of the driving stuff, like the house, the wife and kids. He basically plays Henry's part, except he has 2 daughters instead of 2 sons. So he's a guy who's out of work. He's not a filmmaker. He had a record store, and he's out of work, and he's looking for a job in the record industry. He's never going to get it. He's like a 50-year-old guy. He's never going to get it. And so his wife comes to him one day and says, well, the mortgage is due. You need to just go out and get some kind of work. So he starts driving for a fictional company called DriverX. So we did the 5 days at the house. Very, had a lot of volunteers that came from my class, my no budget film school class that I teach, and I put out a note saying I'm looking for interns. Want to learn from the head of no budget film school, which I've done a couple of times, and had some great people working for free. And then I had, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 paid crew members, so we shot that stuff, and then he had to go off and do a show, and then we were waiting for him to come back. And then kind of like at the last minute, like I'm going to be back for 2 weeks. And so then we shot the bulk of the car stuff in that 2-week period, and a few other things. There were a few other location stuff that wasn't in the car.
And he's like a member of the team, right? He's not like a diva actor. That
my God. The best member of the team.
How much did you spend on his trailer though?
I can tell you that's an easy number. So yeah, I teach this idea that you can't make a movie this way with a prima donna. And one of the first things I always do, or Henry and I always do, we audition people. We like somebody. Now Patrick was a friend of ours. We didn't have to do that with him, but like with Pig, we had Rudolph Martin was the lead actor in that. We read for him. We didn't know him, and we said, between Henry and I, we're like, that's the best actor. We want to cast him. So then we take him out to dinner and we go, let me tell you how we're planning to make this movie. Here's how we want to pay you. We're not going to have any, we may shoot over a 2-year period.
How do you want to pay them?
Maybe what I would say to an actor is, I'm going to pay you a flat fee. And I want to be able to work you as much as I can if I need to, over as long as I need to, and I'm not going to pay you more than that flat fee. So we'll run you through the SAG books, but there may be days where we go out and just pop off a shot with you because we own the camera, always own the camera with these movies.
And what camera are you using?
Different cameras, but I mean, DriverX was the A7S. We can talk about that. But you know, we say, look, you know, we want to take you out and shoot with you, and we don't want to make a big deal about it, and we don't want it to cost like $500 if we decide to do that. So it's partly that, but it's trying to get a sense of why are they doing this film, you know? And often what you find is with these actors is with Rudolph and with Patrick, they're working actors. They work all the time. They get paid. They don't need the money. They know it's ultra low budget. They're not going to make a lot of money. They let their managers know, their reps know, look, it's fine. And they're doing it because the role is good and because they don't usually get that kind of a part. So with Rudolph Martin,
they'd rather be a good movie than get paid an extra $500 or skip the shot.
Well,
right?
So Rudolph was always either a hitman or a vampire, and he didn't have to do either one of those. And Patrick's always in a suit, playing some slick guy in a suit. I mean, always, and he's great at that. But this is not that role at all. And so they're looking to try to show that they can do other things. And so for both those actors, not about the money, and you have to have somebody that really wants to be there because it's just so hard. And if you have a prima donna, and I've worked with prima donnas on some other things, and doing the kind of stuff we were doing, driving all night where he's driving because there's no process trailer. He's driving the car. And I mean, the things that we had to ask of him, first of all, I never felt like I had to ask him anything because he was there and he was willing to do it. And all the way till, 5 minutes ago or whatever, when I talked to him on the phone or whatever. I mean, the guy is like 100%, 120% committed to the project, and that's what you want. But it's not a foreign sales play. It's not a genre film. I mean, it's helpful to have name actors, and we have several people that are familiar faces. But again, and we were very conscious of trying to put people like that in the movie, but knowing we want to work with we want great actors, and they're right for the parts, and they know how we're making the movie because it's not the normal way to make a movie.
Did you have a casting director on this one or no?
Yeah, so
or rather, what I'm really asking is it just that you had a connection to these people that they said yes, or was there? How did you get them? I guess what I'm asking.
Again, it's because we had 50 speaking parts. They all came from different places. So Patrick was somebody that immediately, we knew before, while we were writing the script, we needed to find the right actor for this. And Henry's like, well, let's get Patrick. And he has a small part in Pig, and Patrick was like, in fact, it's funny about Patrick is as long as he's been acting for 25 years, and I've seen a lot of the shows and stuff he's been in, I'm like, I don't know, Patrick's not really right for the part. I mean, that was the first thing I said to Henry. And he's like, no, he's a real actor. He can do it, because this guy does not wear a suit, Leonard, in our movie. That's just not the character. And so, but again, I quickly realized that he was great. But we brought him in so early that Henry and Patrick worked on the script together, which is what Henry likes to do. So.
Right. But what about the smaller roles?
So the smaller roles, it became a thing where, I thought we were going to write roles around actors that we knew we could get, like all the people we've worked with that we love and whatever. But Henry wrote the parts around real rides. This was all based on his experience. And so we had to look at the characters and go, well, maybe is there a part Melissa could play? Melissa Fumero, like, oh, maybe she could do this part. It's not written for her, but it's maybe something she could do. And then you just call Melissa up and you say, hey, Melissa, we got this movie. It's one day. Can you come and do it?
I'm going to pump the brakes. Yeah. Did you have a relationship with Melissa?
Oh yeah, she worked on her. She was the second lead in the movie before.
So that's how you call her.
Yeah. So on some people. So Melissa, Desmond, Randall Battenkoff, Heather Ankeny, Oscar Nunez were people we knew that we just called up.
And you're calling them directly. You're not calling your agent or manager.
God. Oh. I never call people's agent ever. I mean, believe me, don't make me talk to those people. I can't.
This is the stuff our listeners are going to be like, I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. How do I get Melissa Fumero in my movie?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's how we did it.
And cast her in another movie.
And she was in our movie before she got Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And she was terrific in that in House of Jack built. So available on Netflix. But then again, 50 speaking parts. So the wife is the second lead. That's a big part, and we didn't have someone to play that. And we had two casting directors who were casting associates normally.
What are their names?
Vanessa Knight and David Seidel, and we.
And what do they normally cast?
So, I'm not exactly sure. I had given I think a casting director that we'd worked with before, who was a friend of ours, who had casted Pig for free. She moved and she's like, well, try some of these people. And she gave us this name. I think it's Sherry Henderson, who has this company. Yeah. And I think they do mostly like kid shows and stuff. They cast that stuff.
Yeah, and maybe some branded content from.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, I don't know exactly what Sherry.
Sherry's great.
Okay. Oh, but Sherry's like, well, listen, I've got these 2 associates and they would love to cast a feature. And we're like, okay, and we didn't pay them a lot of money. They got paid, considering the amount of work they did, it was very little money.
Yeah, Sherry has a credit on it too.
Yeah. I mean, so she gave us these 2 folks and they were amazing. I mean, they worked their butts off. And so I would say the way we were able to get good people to come in and read for us was a combination of their hustle, not necessarily their muscle, because they weren't, like big time casting directors, but their hustle. And then, Henry's 5th film, and he's worked with other actors. You can look at it, you can go look at his work. The roles and the writing is good on the page, I think, to people. And so we had people coming in that like worked. I mean, they were like, wow, you had your own HBO show. What are you doing in here? I mean, for an ultra low budget film, because we weren't paying anybody extra. I mean, there was never a thing like, well, okay, for you, we'll pay you more. Right. Most of those we got through auditioning, but then there was a friend of ours named Val Lauren, who was the lead in one of our other films, who teaches at Playhouse West, and he had a class of like advanced actors class or something, and Henry cast several actors out of that class and workshopped the scenes with him, which he loves doing.
Oh, cool.
And so there's 2 or 3 or 4 different rides that are cast out of people like that, and some really great stuff in the movie. And so it really came from all over.
So it sounds to me like it's a combination of direct connections, like through basically like having made a handful of movies before, a fistful,
a single hand,
and the connections that your principals have, right? And then also kind of empowering some hungrier casting directors to kind of round out the slots that you didn't have an obvious choice for. Basically.
Yeah, and again, there was a lot of slots. There was a lot of empty
50
roles.
speaking parts.
And so there was no attempt to go to like names like John Hamm type of.
I think for what we did is like maybe we said for Tanya, like we might have said to Patrick, hey, and we had Patrick attached, so that also helped. So when they're saying we're looking for these actors, Patrick Fabian is the lead actor in this movie, so that gave us a little bit of credibility.
I want to talk a little bit more about your approach to production in general, because I think that like oftentimes on this show and kind of all over the place, anytime you hear an interview, people say like, oh boy, we didn't have any money, or like it was a really all hands on deck situation or whatever. And it's sometimes people skate by and don't explain explicitly what that means, right? So you were saying in the car scenes, for instance, right, of which there were plenty, it was you and the director and then your performers, right? Or no? So tell me about that stuff. Right?
If we were to go back, I'm trying to remember all the thoughts I didn't finish, but one of the thoughts I didn't finish that we talked about was like what was some of the difficulties of doing the movie on a small budget. The driving stuff was a big challenge, and I had never done car stuff like this. We'd done some car stuff, but it was during the day, very little dialogue, very small scenes. You're shooting in the
There's a lot of driving,
and or you've got someone in the front seat. These are 8-page scenes of dialogue, where it has to sound perfect, obviously.
And it's kind of the worst because it's a conversation with the person in the driver's seat, which is the worst.
Who's not facing them
to the back seat. Yeah. The worst kind of blocking.
But you got mirrors.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but imperative. You know what I mean?
Like, and it's a challenge for a director because you want to do all these great things, and the first thing the producer tells you is, well, you're not getting a process trailer, so skip all that fancy shots and stuff.
Suction cups.
And so the first mandate from Henry about the driving stuff as well, this we don't want this to look like Taxi Cab Confessions. It needs to look like a movie. It needs to be cinematic, even though we're making this on a micro budget. It needs to look like a movie.
No GoPros.
Yeah, no GoPros, no lights that come out of the from the top of the thing or come from underneath that don't belong there. Unmotivated lighting. No wide angle GoPro looking things in the corner of the windshield. So shallow depth of field, pull focus, that kind of stuff.
Did you use any GoPros at all ever? Or no? Yeah.
No. I'm trying to think. There's a shot that we have that's like in a montage. Maybe that was a GoPro.
Even like
I don't even think that was a GoPro.
Yeah, okay.
Like on wheels.
And believe it or not, no drone shots.
Oh,
yeah. We made a conscious decision not to have a drone, and we had a drone. I had a friend who could do it for us.
You're offending Oren here.
No.
You know, I have a drone.
No, I understand.
It's a running joke.
It is hard to do those at night anyway.
Yeah.
So we met a guy. We had talked to the DP from House of Jack built. Couldn't do it. He lived in New York, and he had a friend he went to AFI with named Daniel Lynn, who Henry had worked with on from that recommendation, had worked with on a music video. And Dan said, "Hey, he hadn't really. I don't know if he'd done a feature at that point, so he was hungry. I don't. If he had done one, it was one or something, but he really wanted to do a feature." And like a lot of guys out here in LA, does a lot of like high paying commercial stuff.
Sure.
And some of that stuff doesn't even tell you much when you look at their reel. You're like, well, this isn't narrative filmmaking. I need to know you can light naturally, and then I really need to know you can do that without any money and still make it look good, which is like a really hard task to ask somebody. But he had done a short film of driving, two nights of like driving stuff. And we went over to his house and we looked at the footage, and he showed me like pictures of how he mounted the stuff. And I'm like, that looks amazing. Like, and so we knew he could do the driving stuff, and he's done a lot of driving stuff. So when we hired him, he had kind of created this way of doing it. So for us, the first thing was, because we knew we were going to be driving, is that if you shoot with a small enough rig and it doesn't, and you're mounting the camera to the sides, if it doesn't stick out beyond the mirrors, you don't need a police escort. That's what he told me. You can just get if you want to be legal, you can get a what's called a grid permit.
I'm not sure that is true.
Maybe it's not. It worked for me. I'll tell you this. This is what I can tell you about that. It's one of those things where I never actually. I think I think it is true. I think when I talked to the film,
I would say, regardless, double check if you're thinking of doing that.
I'll tell you. So that was the line. Anyway, I think it's true because I'm just trying to think of the conversation I might have had. So
I think it's true too. I don't know it's true. Right. I guess is what I'm saying.
But here's what I know. So that was the theory. I'll tell you what I know. So we didn't need a hostess tray is the idea, and he had shot that with the A7S, which was a relatively new camera, but people were using it. So this is a tiny mirrorless camera that
great and low light
sees in the dark. So that's
like
good.
Kind of
full frame,
miraculous,
like miraculous, better than the human eye actually, and like kind of beats out a lot of
it's an amazing camera,
like big, fancy, expensive cameras worth
shooting
50 times that.
A whole short or film or something on Alexa, and then they'll do night driving shots on the A7S.
Yeah. I mean, so a friend of mine, Ilya Friedman, owns this place called Hot Rod Camera, and he's a good buddy. And so I bought the camera from him. I bought his specific camera cage.
Yeah, nice.
I bought
So you bought it used. Smart.
No.
You got it from him.
No, it was new. No, I mean, it was new stuff. I mean, I think I bought a PL adapter that he builds for his cameras that maybe that was used, but I don't remember. I got a really good deal on it, so I don't remember that one. But I bought a lot of the gear from him. We used a Odyssey recorder, and the secret to that camera rig was basically you shoot with Zeiss standard speeds, not super speeds, because they're small and they're light and they're not expensive to rent. I found a guy I know has a big set of them, never rents them because no one cares about those anymore. And those work really well for us.
I think the advice of like getting the awesome but like less trendy gear is always an awesome idea.
Yeah. And again, it worked perfectly for us. Again,
also they're
the
small.
same.
You want to get a Panavision lens, but it's like bigger than your car.
Yeah, exactly. So that with a matte box and stuff, not a very big rig, and so he didn't need a hostess tray, and so our shots are basically they're either in the car, different camera placements in the car, handheld, or they're mounted to the sides or side doors or different places on the hood. And he had all the rig, he had all the mounting stuff already, and then his kind of genius, besides that, was a friend of his, I think they also went to AFI, had built these lights that were basically boxes that had LED strips in them that were that could be tungsten or daylight, and you had these DMX dimmers that you could control the light. You could bring them up and down, and you could also control the color temperature with these remote dimmers. So that stuff was kind of expensive gear. I mean, for me, what I wouldn't be normally doing. but we were able to achieve this like a really amazing look and a whole methodology that worked really well. So what we did is he would mount these lights, or 2 lights. He would mount them to the hood of the car, and they would come in at different, wherever he wanted them to come in, and they would look like street lights. But he was controlling them completely. So he'd bring them up and down to mimic streetlights, but we had total control over that. So if we wanted to bring it up for a certain line of dialogue or whatever, we could do that. He could place it exactly where he wanted it. So that was kind of the secret. And we had this gag also in the movie where the company DriverX sends you these lit up, these X's that you put in 3 parts of your car, which actually Uber is doing now. 3 years later, Uber has copied us. But these X's light up different colors depending on where you are in the trip. So if you're out, if you don't have anybody in your car, it's green, and if someone contacts you, it blinks blue, and then when you pick them, when you're on your way to get them, it's blue solid, and then when you pick them up, it's red, and then it goes back to green. And we're like, when Henry wrote that, I was like, we're not doing that. Like, I can't afford to do that. And then Dan's like, no, I think I can do it. And he had a guy kind of build the lights, and then we used similar LED strips to do that with these DMX dimmers. So we had a lot of this kind of high tech gear. So we basically, the driving stuff was these lights mounted to the hood. Sometimes the camera mounted to the car. We had running a line into the car with the Odyssey, so we could remote control the camera, and we're shooting 4K with the Odyssey because that we had the first generation. We couldn't shoot 4K, and we wanted to shoot 4K so we were finishing in HD, but we wanted to be able to punch in and stuff. Yeah, and we took advantage of that. And sound, we had a sound guy who was in the trunk of the Prius, in the back of the Prius.
When you say in the trunk, you mean literally he was
that's riding. Where he rode in the back.
Well, it's a Prius, so it's like a hatchback.
It's like a hatchback. It's not, but he was small. Unfortunately, he was small because it's not a very big area, and I don't think he enjoyed being back there, but he did it. So the sound is basically he's mounting mics up in the headliner, hidden away. Sometimes they're lobs and sometimes they're a little bit bigger. It depends. I mean, we had 5 people in the car. He might have to string mics all over the place, but he was very diligent, really great. Michael Cooper, who was really terrific sound guy, took that very seriously, but great sound. So basically we had the actors in the car, sometimes a camera operator, because we had a really small, my DP is huge, and I had a really small camera operator, a guy that had just graduated from college. It's a longer story, but anyway, found this guy with the School of the Arts in UNC, who was great, and little guy, which was good, and because this Prius is not big.
The size of your crew, the physical size of your crew is so important.
They're less hungry, and
they eat less. Yeah, no, he was great. Donald Monroe, he was terrific, and he's DP in his own right. Worked with the A7S in this college film that I'd seen. The rest of us are in this minivan. So we are sending, it's like imagine like an FBI surveillance van. Sure. So there's 4 of us in the van. I'm driving the van. Henry's sitting next to me in the front seat with a remote, with a small monitor, and we're sending the video to the van through a Teradek wirelessly. And he's got a monitor, so he's monitoring the performances that way.
Teradeks aren't cheap either, man.
Yeah, but we rented these a lot of the stuff we rented from the first ACs that we were hiring, and they gave us a deal. These are all buddies of the places where I spend a little bit more money than I normally would. I mean, not if you know what real day rates are for the people at this level, but I paid more than I normally would for first AC, the grip, and the gaffer, because they were Dan's buddies. They usually make a ton of money per day, and he just couldn't get them for less. But it was still way below their normal rate.
Right. And if they're rolling up with gear, it's a way to like pay them a little bit more.
Right. I mean, I did pay. I did rent these things like a Teradek on the Preston because we also did remote follow focus on every shot was remote. Which I'd never done before, but again, it's their gear, and I'm not, and the second monitor usually was theirs or something, and I'd pay them a little bit for that. So Henry and I in the front seat, back seat is the DP with this remote wireless dimmers and a second monitor back there, and the first AC is back there pulling focus. So we're driving, and the sound is sent to us wirelessly, and we're plugging it into the auxiliary port of the van, and so we're listening to it over the speakers of the van, and then we have walkies. We're talking back to the to
so
them.
You just have an open walkie.
And so and you have to have an actor like Patrick who not only can act and is really good, but he's totally comfortable.
The director in the car.
Exactly. He's the one pushing start and stop on the Odyssey. He's doing the slate. He's talking on the thing. I mean, it's a lot to ask of an actor.
And I totally 1000% get it. Some actors don't want to drive and act at the same time.
Yeah, it's tricky because like some people I think are really in tune with it, and some people are like, just it's not their bag. Yeah.
But you know what Patrick says about the driving and acting is that it gives you something to do. Like if you're fake driving, that's like you're thinking about how you're fake driving. This, you're like, it's actually easier to, he felt it was easier to actually drive.
That's interesting.
And he has that thing to do. It's a real thing. It's a real task to do. And so, but the other great thing about an actor like Patrick and Desmond, who, if you know, is on You're the Worst, he's been on for like 4 or 5 seasons or however many seasons of that show. These guys, they're TV actors. They're pros. You give them a technical note, and it goes in their technical note bank, and they never forget it, and they do it, and then yet they're still giving you a fresh performance every time. They know where the cameras are. They know where, you know, how you're going to be editing it.
Right, but they're always like lifting that coffee mug at the same time in the right hand.
Their marks and knowing where the light is and where the lens is.
Yeah. So the driving stuff was, you know, we shot like that 2-week period. We still had to come back and do pickups and a little bit of driving stuff, but that was most of the driving stuff. And we had, so the crew was basically what I described. Plus we had a key grip and a gaffer who would stay. We'd put them in a parking lot. We'd kind of mount everything up, mount the lights and the camera and everything. And then we just the van and the Prius would go out and drive around. And then we'd come back to that parking lot in that whatever part of town we were in, and we would reset. And then we base camp somewhere like my apartment or Henry's house. And this was the trick. We had a couple of people at the base camp who were interns, the worst job in the world. You just hang out at the apartment, wait for new actors that were coming at like, 10 at night or whatever for later scenes, and sign them in and get them to do their paperwork. And then one of the other helpers was making lunch for us at 11:30 at night.
Right.
It was all night shoots
for the driving stuff. It was all, we did probably two different scenes that were day driving stuff, but almost all the driving stuff is night stuff. So I think we probably had total like 22 days of shooting, stretched out over these periods. So we shot these office scenes and a couple of different like weekends that we did, later. And we'd like edit the film, and we knew we owed this stuff, and then we would kind of rewrite some of that stuff. That's one of the advantages. You're kind of editing it, and as you go, and you're like, let's rewrite that opening scene because I think it'd be better if it's the movie's starting to turn into this. So we do that a lot.
And I saw your editor had edited like Donnie Darko and Tomb Raider.
Yeah, he's an interesting Eric. We've worked with 3 times. And in all 3 cases, Henry does the first cut. He does what he likes to call a sophisticated assembly. It's a pretty refined assembly, but every scene is in there. Every once in a while, there's like a scene that just doesn't make that assembly. It's like just never. There's no chance.
Right, but he does all of the.
He selects the takes.
Yeah, he's selecting the takes and doing that first pass, which is a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and so we don't have the money usually to pay Eric to do the whole thing, and so he'll do that. And then Eric he often comes in as the second editor. And when we brought him in for Pig, he came in. We showed all these editors the rough cut, and we're like, what are your notes? Can you make this better than we were doing Pig? And so he's a great editor. And so we used him in that same capacity on House of Jack Built, and then he came in and did DriverX. We knew we were going to be using him for DriverX, and so he came in, and he'll choose different takes, and he'll has his own take on a scene or whatever. And then it was just a really tough movie to get down in the editing room. I mean, it's a lot of like. It's a kind of serialistic movie. I don't know if that's the right word. It's serialized. There's a lot of like, you're moving things around, you're cutting things down. I mean, that extra time which we took, I think made a huge difference. In fact, right before we locked, we were kind of waiting to get into our first film festival, and I was working. I had like 45 effects shots and had 0 money. And I've actually done a lot of effects stuff since then. But I found 2 people to help me with effects. I found this guy that had taken my class who did all the overlays. And I threw him a little bit of money, but I mean, like token amount of money. And then he was going to do this is basically most of the effect shots, not all of them. Most of them were the phone
screen
app.
replacement.
Screen replacement, and which we didn't know what we were doing, so we didn't have the proper thing on the screen and that kind of stuff. But so he did the overlays, and then Patrick was out at a diner one day, and someone came up to him and said, "Hey, you're from Better Call Saul. I love you." And he's like, "Oh, great. Who are you? What do you do?" And he goes, "Well, I do effects and I do visual effects." He's like, "Really?
How much do you love me?"
So exactly. So he gave him his card. I called him up, and basically he said, "I'll do all those if my wife loves him, if we can go to dinner with him." I said, "Okay." And this was a lot of work. This was some of this stuff was not easy to composite. And then I ended up throwing him some money too, just because he just did so much work. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was like, let me give you a few $100s on me.
Wait, so he wanted a double date with Patrick, or? So
Patrick took him and his wife to dinner. It was like a new wife, I think, too. So he was trying to impress her, I think. Anyway, but Patrick's super nicest guy in the world. Took him to dinner. And I've used this guy on paying gigs now since as well. He did a lot of work on this web series that I did. He's great. I mean, he has a day job and he has to find the time. And this took months to do these effect shots because everybody's doing their other things. Right? Yeah, that's the problem. And so we were waiting to get into a festival and waiting for these shots to be done. And then finally we kind of had our first festival. And then right before we locked, Henry said, I want to go back through and just see if there's any like 10 seconds here and there I can take out. Just feels like there's too much air or whatever. He cut 4 minutes out that last, which is a lot. It's a lot, and it really helps the movie just kind of move, And in fact, some of it was like he didn't tell me, and I didn't know until we were like in the sound mix,
right?
And I mean, actually, that effect shot that I spent so much time on it doesn't even make sense anymore because he cut something out that it related to or whatever. But it was a really, and there were a couple things that you're like, dang, that was a good line. You cut that line, and he just was brutal. And Henry's like a kill your kids, kill your babies kind of a editor. He doesn't not hold anything sacred. I'm the one that's usually hanging on to stuff.
You're like, no, that was so hard. Do you remember?
Yeah, exactly.
It was 2 a.m. when we shot that
because of that reason, which is not the best reason. But I mean, I try to say, look, this is what our movie is, and we need to keep this and that kind of stuff. And I'm hopefully I can come in with that kind of bigger, wider perspective or whatever, because that's my job. But yeah. So and I would say something else, which, because I have done post-production supervising so much over the 20-something years or whatever, even though I don't really call myself a post-production supervisor, but I try to find workflows that aren't going to be really expensive. And the workflow for this would have worked out really well, which was we basically edited our camera original in Final Cut Pro X, if you can believe it.
Whoa, okay, all right.
And no one liked that idea except for me because it was cheap. But it worked, and it worked out pretty well. And so the kind of advantage of doing that is that, all these push-ins, all that stuff, if you can get the effect shots soon enough, you're cutting those in. And we just basically turned over a single QuickTime to my post house, and they did a notch conform where they bring it into Resolve and it cuts it up into shots for you. And so they're not doing a lot of online. I mean,
it's a pretty smart process too.
Yeah, it works out really well. And I mean, did like 3 shows right around that same time and with different workflows, and this is the way to do it.
As long as you don't have like a ton of graphics or anything, that's super smart. You know what I love, just going back a tiny bit about the post thing, because I think that oftentimes on a micro budget or on any feature can be a surprisingly significant amount of cash, a large portion of your budget. Yeah. And so oftentimes the micro budget solution is like have someone on the team do it themselves, basically, typically the director. So I like the combination, the 1-2 punch of like, do the hard work, do the heavy lifting, do the grunt work that a fancy editor doesn't want to do. Exactly. And then you still get the benefit of like a second pair of eyes and someone who hasn't been up, till 6 a.m. for 22 days in a row.
And taking care of kids.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, we put money into, I mean, when I do a budget, like the initial budget of this film, I just kind of made up a couple of numbers. This is how much we're going to spend in post, and this is how much we're going to spend in production. And
can you give us a ballpark for how much DriverX cost?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to say it, and I'm not sure why I don't like to say it, because it's like I feel like some people are going to hear that number and they're going to think, well, you spent a ton, and some people are going to hear that number and go, well, this movie, it's not a real movie, and so I never know what the.
Is it ultra low budget?
I'll tell you this.
SAG?
Yeah, and comfortably ultra low budget, but basically, I'll tell you this. I went in with this idea before I probably got a script. I went in with the idea that I was going to spend $100,000. I was going to spend $50,000 to shoot it and $50,000 to post it, roughly. And I know on the post side, I know there's a certain amount of money I'm want to spend. So like I don't chintz out on the sound. Like I know what I can get a full production sound package with all the stuff. I know what I can pay for that, and I put that number in my budget right away. And I can make rough estimates on some of the other effects. I didn't really know what that was going to cost me, and I ended up spending, like I told you, I threw a little bit of money these people's way, but I didn't have any proper effects budget. I knew we used the same composer, so I knew I was going to pay her. I knew roughly what I was going to pay Eric. So but we're paying real people, and I could have done it cheaper. I know we could. The music was really expensive on this movie, relatively speaking, and I could have done it cheaper. But we're not trying to make it for the lowest amount of money. And Henry doesn't even want to work this way. He doesn't want to work. He hasn't wanted to work this way since 2001. So for me, it's about like, how can I afford it? And if it's a good value, I will throw money at it. So that's always the way I do it. So we spent a little bit more than that 100. We went over, I think it's like 130.
Gotcha.
Did you have a makeup and wardrobe department?
So when we started shooting, we were rushing to shoot because we figured there were going to be 1,000 Uber movies. And we wanted to be the first, or we just didn't want to be buried in this. So we rushed in to start shooting. I hadn't raised any money. I had planned to raise, my goal was I was going to raise $120,000 in equity and like $30,000 in Kickstarter and have $150,000 and make it for less than $150,000 and use the rest of the money for marketing and stuff like that. That was my goal. And so, but I hadn't raised anything when we started shooting. I had a bunch of 0% credit card offers. I'm like, these people are crazy. Why are they sending this stuff to me? So I shot most of the movie without raising $1 just on the 0% credit cards. I mean, almost all of it. I mean, we still had a few pickup stuff after I raised some money, but basically that's how little it cost. So you asked the makeup. I had the makeup person for the 5 days at the house, and I barely paid her. She was great too, by the way. And then I think she did maybe 1 or 2 more days for me when I needed her. But for the most part, we didn't have a makeup person. I had a wardrobe person who'd worked with me on Pig. She was the costume designer, and she got paid a very small flat fee. And then we found an intern who was on set mainly, again, just for that 5 days. But they helped with the kind of book and making sure their continuity. And basically Patrick was the one that would look on his, this book to make sure he was wearing the right thing once we got away from that. Once we started doing the driving stuff. So there wasn't makeup and wardrobe for most of the movie. And then
the book is like what wardrobe this character wears on each day.
Right. And we're pulling from closets mostly. I mean, there's a few things that we had to. She makes stuff. She likes to make stuff, and she'll find stuff that's really great. I mean, it's that nice thing about, like, normally I wouldn't have a costume designer on something like this, but she adds that creative element, and she's not expensive, and she's a great friend, and she so it's that subtle stuff of like he's wearing stuff that really makes his character that normally I would say I just pull from his closet or whatever, but it's nice to have that person if you can get it. So, and
I think I saw a clip where like a girl is throwing up, right?
There's a couple of those in the movie.
Is that so
why else do you get an Uber though?
You need doubles for wardrobe and all that stuff for those type of situations?
I don't think she throws up there were 2 times where people throw up. One, we didn't have a double, but we've managed to figure out a way for her to make it look like she's throwing up in her outfit, but she doesn't. And then the other one's throwing up outside of the car. So we didn't have any doubles for that. Just trying to think.
A lot of chicken
We
soup.
did not spend much money on wardrobe, I can tell you. I mean, I don't think we really bought anything for this one. It's like, is this really important? Does this have to be done right? Then you put the money there. And I mean, as an example of this, so we're shooting at the house, and the original crew, and there's no truck, there's no gear. Dan had some stuff in his garage, and then he had a buddy who has a bigger garage that he rents stuff, and we'd gotten some stuff from him, and Dan would just show up in his station wagon with this gear,
with the stuff,
like lights.
Yeah. With some Apple boxes and some C stands and a couple lights and whatever. And it was very little. We didn't. I don't, on that part of the shoot, that 5-day shoot, I don't think we rented anything. It was like lighting gear. We never had a real truck. There was one day where we were lighting a bigger location. I rented a van, and I went and picked up some stuff from different places, and a dolly, like we had a dolly for that day and stuff, a dory dolly. So an example of kind of how I operate, we're shooting this 5 days. It's Dan, the DP, a first AC, and one guy, his buddy, who's the gaffer or whatever. And that's working out. We shot a couple of days, and he comes up to me and he said, listen, so we're making our day and whatever, but if you can get me one more guy for the next 3 days, it's going to make a big difference. We're going to be able to get even more shots and whatever. And I talked to Henry and I'm like, done. I mean, I knew what that amount of money was going to be, and it's like, that's worth it to me. And that's how I like to operate. I don't like to, because it's my money.
Right.
I don't need to worry. I mean, I'm now doing these other shows for other people, and you realize you can't operate like that. Like, it's like, you can't spend more than the money they give you, or you're kind of screwed or whatever. And I usually, and fortunately, I've come under budget.
I know I've got a Discover card that I haven't opened the envelope on yet.
Exactly. So, I mean, I like to put, again, if it's a good value, that's where I like to put it. So, and if I can do it myself, I do it, which hurts sometimes. That's not the right thing to do sometimes, and then sometimes you just, you just end up having to do it because you couldn't find somebody or whatever. So, I mean, I save a lot of money doing it myself, but I also get hurt, by overdoing it. But
tell us a little bit more about that. What are the ways in which? Can you give an example of like where you wish you hadn't done it yourself?
So I wanted to hire a first AD for the driving stuff, even though it wasn't clear where he was even going to be, or she. And I had a guy that I barely paid do the house stuff, even though I was scheduling it and I was doing the call sheets, and I used this program called Lightspeed. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
It's like one of these online production management software where you plug everything in and then spit out these like kind of ugly looking call sheets, but you can spit them out and you can just click the people you're sending it to. I wouldn't have been able to do this movie without Lightspeed. I wanted to have a first AD, and I was looking for somebody who could work for like $100 a day, and I could not find anybody. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll go up to 200, but there's no way I'm paying more than 200 for something that not even 100% sure I need. Just make my life a little easier, and I don't need to make my life easier. Right. Henry was like, you need to get in first AD because, and there were some times where, because there wasn't somebody cracking the whip, and I had like 10 other things I was doing, because I'm I'm doing the walkies, I'm doing craft service, doing all the other stuff, that we lost a little bit of time, like especially when it was lunch. Like we had to go to lunch and kind of remount and new actors coming in.
Wait, that's lunch. And then you realize like, oh, I've got to go
do 10 other things.
Drive and pick up lunch.
But so there were some times where I think we didn't get as much done because there wasn't somebody kind of cracking the whip. But that adds up. I mean, that would have been a lot of money. And once we got the groove of it, this kind of getting in the, we knew the beats of the day on the driving stuff. It was really fun and it worked out really well. So I don't know. I mean,
let me ask you a question about this first AD business, because Matt and I have had many discussions about this idea of like where you can get inexpensive crew. Did you ever think to go to like Craigslist or something like that?
I go to Craigslist often. I think on that one I was looking at everywhere. I was mostly looking for talking to people that I knew, that there were like DGA people I knew that had like, oh yeah, I got this guy or girl who's a PA who set PA. They're getting their days. They know that I didn't need somebody who was
they need
like
a little practice.
And we're not, we're talking about a tiny crew and it's not a lot of elements and stuff. And so,
but you still want someone like on Craigslist, there's still a 50% chance they won't show up, right?
Yeah. Well, the rule I have is you interview at least 3 people for each and every job. So if you have the time and you can do that, then you can usually feel that out. If they're serious, they're going to show up. And maybe you run down some of their recommendations as well. I've found somebody that I was going to hire somebody and actually knew someone on their recommendation, and they told me they were horrible. This is on another movie. I was like, oh my God, thank God I asked. But if you interview people, you can usually feel that out. But I'm almost always finding, if it's the grip and electric and AC, the camera kind of, you usually get those people from your DP. I mean, they're going to, I mean, if they don't, they'll tell you like, I've got 2 or 3 deep here or not, or whatever. And then you may need to go and find some other people. But, and now that I've been doing some other, when we started that show, I hadn't done production in a while and I didn't have a real list. I mean, I was going out to friends of mine that do it all the time. And hey, who do you know? And sound is always like impossible to find because I'm never paying anything close to the sound rate. And
they're bringing their own gear and
and
sound
again,
is always rough.
Ron Judkins, it's good to have a friend like that who can hook you up with somebody, and he's always hooks me up with a really good sound person. So, but now I've been doing other shows, and I've been, and I have a little bit of a list now. I've done, 2 shows kind of close to each other with big crews and made some, connections and saw how people worked, and they're making usually more money than I would normally pay, but yeah, I know if they want to step up, if they want to move up from something or whatever. So I have a little bit better list now than I did when I started shooting DriverX. But I mean, the thing is, you make you make a film like Pig, and you've got some person who's an intern, and they're amazing, and they just like ran your whole art department, and they were working for free. And then 2 years later, when you're ready to make a movie, or 4 years later, they're like in the union, and they're like art director now, and you're like, you can't, you can never go back to them. You can go back to them and see if they have ideas for you, but you can't get them. So
let me ask actually something that I think about all the time with indie stuff, and I feel like when I was younger and doing, like, I sometimes maybe didn't know better. How do you deal with like liability and insurance and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so that's a number that I write down in that $100,000 budget. There are certain numbers that are set, and for me, I always get the regular production package. It's $3,500 to $4,000. I always that's a number I put in there. I'm not going to go make a movie with all this stuff and not have that. I never pay like production to do like contracts and stuff. I hired a lawyer to do my operating agreement and LLC and that stuff, and I found a great guy who I paid not a lot of money to. And that was something I didn't want to do. And I've done it before, kind of had like Ron had done it on an earlier movie, LegalZoom and stuff. But I don't like, there's just things like lawyers like, man, that's not showing up on the screen.
What happens if like an intern rolls their ankle?
Yeah, no, I mean, those things happen. I mean, and we actually had some gear stolen, but it was kind of our negligence, so it wasn't like the insurance company was going to pay for it anyway. But yeah, I mean, I try to run a safe set. I'm not doing anything illegal there. I mean, I do things like I hardly ever use filming permits. I had this grid permit, which was $710, and then I had not another permit on the movie. And I've gotten busted enough over the years, and I teach this in my class, like how to kind of do that without getting, how to do that without getting busted.
I'm always curious.
Or when you want to do a permit, sometimes you should.
Yeah. I've been told to like scram sometimes, but like, have you ever gotten busted? Like, have you ever had your gear impounded or anything like that?
I mean, if someone comes up to you and you don't have a shooting permit, you're incredibly honest and nice. This happened to us on we were with this crazy night of shooting. It was one of these nights where we did a mixture of driving and location stuff, and it was just, I mean, I was one of my proudest moments because I was first ADing that, and it was just brutal. But we kind of like had to hit our marks all through the night, like in all these different locations and stuff. And then we were waiting. We were actually waiting for the sun to come up because we had this last shot that was a sun up shot in Santa Monica, and we're on the Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica with this little group, and we set up the tripod, we're waiting the lights, and then these cops drive up, and we're like, "Fuck, cops," And it's our last shot of the day, last little scene. And they go, and it was kind of a good cop, bad cop. And the guy goes, "So what are you doing?" Like, "Oh, we're making a little movie. It's our last shot. We're just waiting for the sun to come up so we can get the shot." He goes, "Do you have a permit?" And I go, "I don't." And I said it like I knew I was supposed to have. I'm like, I don't. I mean, I was doing some driving stuff. I have a grid permit, but we just thought it'd be nice to get this shot, and I don't. And I'm sorry. And one guy was being a dick, and then the other guy's like, "All right, take your camera off the tripod," which I normally would do if I was worried about it. I wasn't even worried. It seemed like such a safe thing. It was like 6 a.m, and there was like a Sunday morning or something. And normally I would be hiding and stuff, but it was like, I didn't think there was anybody around. And so he was cool. He's like, just like make it lower key, which was already pretty easy for us to do. And so he let us do it. We shot it. So, cool. But yeah, I've never had my stuff. I've been busted in bigger ways with a big crew and stuff, and no one's going to take your stuff. And if you're an asshole, they could arrest you and they could do that stuff. But if you're just, nice. I mean, I've not always been honest, but I've always been incredibly polite. I mean, one time I gave a permit for another location. Like, we have a permit here. Sure. And they came back the next day and like, no, we checked that. Anyway, so there're just certain things that so you're talking about insurance. So there's certain things that I write down that budget. Actors that are, I break down the script. I know how many shooting days I have. I know how many actors I have, and I plug in the number for actors. Because that's a set amount of money. Insurance is a set amount of money. A crew rate is roughly a set amount of money, and then it's up to me to decide how many crew members do I need for this movie or for this, And so I kind of go through and say, well, we don't need a script supervisor. We don't need all these I usually work with a very thin crew, and then for this one, the rate bounced up a little bit because I was working with people that had a lot of experience and I couldn't get them for cheaper. But and then again, some of it's very aspirational. You're like, I have this list of locations, and this one's worth paying this much for. This one's worth, and hopefully I'll find it. If I have a little bit of money to throw at it, then that gives me a better chance. I can go out on Facebook or ask my friends and say, hey, I'm looking for something. I've got a little bit of money. That always helps, you know. So, and then, you know, what can I do myself? And sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you get boned. And, you know, I got boned a couple of times on the show where you just throw away money for something. And, you know, that always happens, even when you have experience. But yeah, that's kind of, you know, and again, in post, there's just things I like to spend money on in post. So.
Well, we should probably start wrapping up, but I still have a few, I feel like, important questions. Number one is, where's the movie premiering?
So DriverX, IFC Films, and their label Sundance Selects is releasing the film in theaters and on demand beginning November 30th.
Awesome.
We are opening in New York on November 30th at the IFC Center, and then we'll do a big, you know, kind of first time LA premiere, cast and crew kind of a thing, opening night in Los Angeles on the 30th. And we're opening at the Limley Monica Film Center. Oh, we have a lot of special nights planned. I have a No Budget Film School night where we're going to talk about this kind of stuff with Peter Broderick will be guest moderating. We have a I call it the Better Call Saul night. We have a couple of cast members along with Patrick for Talkback, and we'll have prizes and trivia. We have I went to the University of Texas, as I mentioned. We have a UT night that we're doing with an after party at Cabo Cantina afterwards. We have I'm trying to put together a rideshare night where, like, if you drive, you get in for half price, and we'll have prizes. And, you know, I have still a little time to put all this stuff together, but that one's coming together. So we're trying to do like fun stuff. It's opening in other cities. It's a 10-city minimum, and it'll probably be in more than 10 cities, but I don't have all the lists yet. It's in Albuquerque and Santa Fe the next weekend, the December 7th. Patrick will be there. That's kind of his home away from home at Albuquerque. Yeah. I just saw that we were going to be in Savannah. I don't know much about that one. I've heard of other cities, and I'm trying to get some other places that I have a foothold, but I haven't gotten dates yet, so I don't want to say anything.
So you're not doing a traditional festival premiere?
We went to festivals for a year. Yeah.
Oh,
we premiered last year, and I played like 15 festivals. So, and that was, I like playing festivals. And I think it's really valuable to kind of see, you know, who the film is appealing to and why, and I always hand out clipboards and get email addresses at those things, and so I have, like, you know, people on my list that I can help, you know, that can help kind of spread the word and that kind of stuff. So,
and did you sell out of a festival? Sorry, did you get your distribution deal at a festival?
No. In fact, that from the very beginning, we thought we would show the film to AMC because they do Better Call Saul, and see what they think. And if they are excited about it, you know, what would they say? Would they want to throw it over to IFC? Would they want to?
Because it's all owned by the same.
Yeah, it's all on, you know, and I worked for IFC a long time ago, so I kind of know that it's not, you know, it's still very separate companies and stuff. But you know, we showed. Eventually, they did look at it at AMC, and the guy really liked it, the president, and he showed it to folks at IFC, and they really liked it, and they said, yeah, we want to do it, and we'll give you the, you know, day and date theatrical. And I, you know, I looked at some other, I got some other offers, but the IFC thing worked out the best for us. And so, yeah, we're really excited. I mean, you know, you look at, it's kind of a daunting, you look at the list of films. IFC does a lot of films, but you look at their list of films, and they're like really high quality movies, and they're made for millions of dollars, and they have, you know, even if they're smaller, like a film like Blaze. I mean, I don't know what they made Blaze for, but that's not a $100,000 movie. That's I'm sure over $1 million movie. So it's, you know, I think that kind of instantly gets you into some company that is nice. It's a nice stamp of approval. And
do you think you'll recoup your investment? Are you don't know that
why
yet,
would
right?
You ask me that? I have no idea. I mean, we make these movies with the idea that we likely won't. But this one, I went out and I did raise a little bit of money from. I didn't mention this. When we started shooting, we didn't have any money. I put that money in myself. Then I raised $40,000 on Kickstarter and another $10,000 from somebody who wanted to be in the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. So essentially $50,000 on from donations I don't have to give back. And then I got a little bit of extra money from my mother and my sister and a couple of friends. And that money I do want to give back to those people. So
sure.
But at the same time, when it's my money, that's not the first, you know, I mean, I'd love to get my money back, but we make these movies because we want to make movies, and we don't want to sit around. And so I really don't know. I mean,
but is there no idea when you're making like $130,000, you know, a film under $250,000 that,
you'd like to think
it's
that would
realistic?
Be simple. It's realistic. I mean, because there are, you know, there's a SVOD kind of output deal in there, and
they're still foreign, even if
there's
you're not
foreign.
excited about it.
It's just I really don't know. I mean, I don't know how much they're spending. I mean, I know that they spend a lot of money on the trailer, which I think is terrific, and that's what they do. Distributors spend a lot of money on stuff like that, and there's gonna be some costs, and if you know how deals are structured, which I can't really talk about, but if you know generally how a distribution deal is structured, it's hard. It's hard. They have to recoup, and there's a fee and all this stuff, but there is definitely mathematically, certainly there's a way to make our money back, I think, on this. And so yeah, we're hopeful. But I don't do this, I don't do this to get rich.
Well, I guess that's kind of a good segue to my second question, which is, you hear the story, and you've heard it on this podcast many times, of the person that made the $60,000 film, and nothing happened with that, and then they made the $100,000 film, and then they got the TV pilot or the studio deal or whatever, the multi-million-dollar deal. And obviously you've worked on multi-million-dollar shows that aren't your own, but you've also been doing the no-budget films for 20 years. Is that kind of the duality of your career for the rest of time? Or
don't ask me about the long-term of my career, because that's frightening. For a producer, you make a successful $100,000 film, big deal. I mean, no one's going to hire you. You can't pay somebody to make $100,000. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that Henry and I did not get paid a salary to make DriverX, right? So if I have a special skill, and I like to think I'm pretty good at this particular kind of movie, $100,000 movies. I mean, I made a few of them, and I'm very proud of them. They look quote great. I don't really care. That's not the most important thing to me, but I feel like I can do that pretty well, and I have a lot of different skills that I don't think I'm good at any of them enough to just do that one thing, but I can kind of do a lot of things. But I'll never make money doing that, because there's no money to pay someone to do that. And if you're going to hire me to make a $5 million film, well, I might have a fee. I don't know how to make a $5 million film. I mean, I know a little bit. I mean, I've learned obviously something. But that's not my specialty, necessarily. I mean,
but you've had films at South by, at Sundance, at LA Film Festival. You have a movie with IFC and Sundance. Does your taste and your creative producing have a value?
I hope. I mean, it's funny because I don't go out and look for projects. I mean, Henry is a steady stream. The teaching thing has always been able to keep me in the world, which I love, of micro-budget filmmaking. I love it for a lot of reasons we haven't even talked about. And I've been able to, because of the teaching, I've been able to kind of stay in that world and make a little bit of money off the teaching and stuff. But I'm getting older, and whatever, I need to probably be more responsible for myself. But the other part of it is the filmmaker. So usually it's the filmmaker that benefits. You make a $100,000 film as a writer director, and it's successful, then they hand you the director a bigger gig, right? And the problem, I think, with Henry, it's just been Henry's incredibly talented guy. I mean, he's a great writer. He's a great director with actors, especially.
He made a feature for $3,000 that went to Sundance.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean, no one's seen it. If you're a Kickstarter backer, and you gave $50, you got the DVD of it. That's the only way anybody can see the movie now. And so why he doesn't direct TV all day long, I have theories. I mean, one of them is he's 52 years old, 52. I mean, he could have had it right after Sundance, because he was still in his late 20s, and then this weird series of things happen. Where this film, the company goes out of business that does this film,
right.
and then these producers walk away from this other film, and it's hard to explain how a career goes, but he just keeps making good movies. And House of Jack Built, I thought was such a great movie as far as the directing went. And why that didn't turn into a bigger job, or and he works. I mean, it's not like he doesn't do anything, but why that didn't, I have to think it's because he's older, and this industry loves to find the next big thing that's 23 years old, that's right out of that gets into Sundance or whatever. And so it's just a weird thing for the way it works. So
yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
And look, you guys, if you're making a living doing branded content or something like that, you made that choice, early on to get in there, and then now you're getting maybe a high. I mean, I don't know if that's what you're doing, but I've done a little branded content myself. I was shocked, what they were going to pay me for the quote work I was doing. I was like, I'm doing nothing, and I was getting paid this huge day rate for like online, this is for like Facebook videos. And it was like this insane. And then I realized everybody's doing this. I mean, I'm an old guy. I came in that stuff is, if I was younger, maybe I would have started doing that originally and then made features. I started making features right away. And then that stuff happened and I didn't know anything about it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I could be making this kind of money doing this stuff.
Well, it's because more people watch that Facebook video than Better Call Saul.
Exactly. So anyway, so I think, I think it's almost easier for a younger person to kind of make their mark in those kind of commercial products and stuff. And Henry made a feature. I mean, he made a short film that played in a lot of festivals and won awards, and then he made this film that got into Sundance, and that's what he does. And so he's never, I mean, he could be and he should be maybe, but he's never kind of gotten that world of like commercials. And I mean, he's done a lot of acting actually in commercials because he's a good actor and he has an agent and he books stuff, just for the money. It's not like, he's a good actor. He's booked theatrical stuff as well. But that's a lot of where he gets his, gets paid for stuff. But he should be making TV. He should be directing the kind of shows I see on HBO that I recognize the directors' names. I'm like, well, why?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a weird business.
Yeah. Matt, you got anything else? I mean, obviously we could talk to you forever.
Like 6 other episodes worth of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, how can we find out more about DriverX and your No Budget Film School also?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. So yeah, DriverX, you can, I'm just redoing the website, but it's driverxmovie.com, and everything, all the places we're screening, all the trailer, everything we're doing is on driverxmovie.com or will be. Our social media handles are at DriverXmovie for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I am at, there's nobudgetfilmschool.com, which is the worst. If you want to know what websites look like in the 90s, because they don't exist anymore, go to nobudgetfilmschool.com, which I built in 2005, and it's the same website, but it looked old in 2005. So, but I'm working on that. When I have time, I'm going to completely redo the website and really get more serious. I haven't taught a class in a while because I've been so busy in the last 2 years, but I am going to be really getting back into, I'm putting together a whole day class on DriverX where I cover a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, but in depth with slides and exact numbers. And, if you want to know what we spend on why on something, I'll be publishing all that stuff on, this class that I do. So I'm going to really get serious about that, come, next year. And I'm going to probably be doing some lecturing at film schools while I'm going around the country with the film, as well. And then I have a website. It's my name, which, maybe in the show notes or something, markstolaroff.com, another way to find me. So, yes, and at Stolaroff.
We will have it. Yeah. All of those links in the show notes for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, before we do our final sign off stuff, should we jump into unpaid endorsements?
Unpaid endorsements.
Oren, you got anything?
I have one thing. It's going to seem like a paid endorsement, but I swear it is not. I just, I have this friend, Josh Genowitz. He has this company called filmfarm.com, and he does a ton of stuff. He's a director, filmmaker, writer. He's very talented. But the reason I'm bringing him up is he owns an Alexa Mini. He has like 2 Ingenue Optimo zoom lenses. He has like Jokers, like 2 Jokers, the 800 watt like HMI lights. He has like a bunch of other lights and equipment and everything. And it is just sitting at his
We use
house.
those Jokers.
The Jokers are just like, they're amazing. They're so expensive to buy. Yeah. But
they're very versatile.
Yeah, if you want a natural looking light.
It's the light to have.
Yeah. So his gear is on it's on ShareGrid or Kit Split or whatever, one of those things.
Probably both.
But like if you are wanting to make like a short film or a spec commercial or something, and you're like, oh, I could never afford like an Alexa with nice zooms and like a few nice lights and stuff. Like you totally can. Like if you, I think on Kit Split or whatever, the whole camera package is like $1,000. I'm sure he would give you a better deal. Mm-hmm. If you are interested in it at all or want to drop my name or our name or just shoot it pod, or you feel free to email us at just shoot it pod. We don't get paid at all. This I know this seems like an endorsement.
Have you talked to him about this?
I was just in his garage the other day and I was like, dude, you have like amazing equipment. He's like, yeah, I wish it was working. I wish it was doing something. It's like, I just put on Kit Split, whatever. And I was like, well, like, I'm sure our listeners, I mean, you could probably get an amazing deal at like any camera house as well, But I think sometimes when
the Mini is expensive. That's a really expensive camera to rent.
So. But when you're first here in LA, you're like, oh, I could never afford this, like the same camera that they shoot like every TV show with. But you totally can't. Like for a few $100s, you can.
If you're making a short
day.
film and you're just going to shoot over a weekend, the weekend rate on like ShareGrid for that stuff isn't crazy.
Yeah,
So,
but
and,
I think
and what you can get an A7S II for on ShareGrid is ridiculous. Like it's like, oh.
What's interesting about him is all the he's been in Hollywood the same amount of time that we've been. Like at least like 10, 15 years or whatever. And so all the DPs he like came up with when he was like really into buying equipment, they would all use his equipment. But now all his friends that are DPs just go to Panavision,
Right.
every single shoot because they want, it doesn't matter what the budget is, they want to like kind of improve their relationship with these big camera houses. Yeah. So he has all this gear that's amazing, but he doesn't have like those young kind of hungry DP friends that are like using it. So anyway, but him or the whole kit split ShareGrid thing is like this amazing thing I have yet to really dive into, but is an exciting way to see equipment work.
Get some gear. Yeah.
You got anything, Matt?
Yes, I do. I have a podcast called The Turnaround, which is especially interesting to Oren and I, but I think other listeners will like it as well. It's by Jesse Thorne, who does Bullseye, which is an NPR show, but it's him interviewing famous interviewers. So I came across it actually because I've been on an Errol Morris kick for the last 3 years. And like just was like, oh, I bet he's been interviewed on some podcasts. I have some time to kill, and found that. And like he did Dick Cavett, he did all these awesome famous interviewers. So it's like a really great conversation. He himself is a great interviewer, having done it for a long time. But like to understand what it is that people are looking for when they're talking to interesting people is fascinating. So,
did you glean any tips?
I've heard Errol Morris talk about like interviewing. There's a couple lessons they're stuck in my head. They're like Errol Morris, like one of them. These are famous ones, like where you don't talk and you when they're done talking, you just sit there and wait, and then they get uncomfortable and they start talking, and then the next thing they say is always the interesting
good
thing.
one. Yeah, he calls that the shut the fuck up rule.
Don't interrupt the people and all that stuff.
Yeah, we should learn that, Oren.
Well, you don't need it with me because I just talk. I don't need you to. Just talk.
Yeah, we're gonna go now.
I'm a talker. That's my thing. Well, if I can, I told you I didn't really have one in mind, but you mentioned some stuff and you mentioned some things. So I worked on a podcast for Shudder as a, if you can believe it, I was a post-production supervisor on a podcast, which I didn't even know you could do, but a friend of mine produced it and he had to go out of town and he's like, come in and do this. And it's called Video Palace. It's a fiction, creepy kind of fiction podcast. First time Shudder's ever done that. And it's really great. It's getting really good reviews out there. If you're on Shudder, you can listen to the whole thing at once, but I think we're on episode 6 or 7 out of 10 now on iTunes. So if you're on iTunes, look for it, Video Palace, if you like that kind of thing. It's really fun. And then I would just say, I threw out some of these names already, but, when I think about DriverX, is like there were just things that worked for me, like Lightspeed, that program worked for me. The Sony A7S really worked for me. Hot Rod Camera, can't say enough great things about Hot Rod Camera in terms of just support I didn't spend any more money to buy that stuff from them if I'd bought it at B&H. And I got all this great advice. And when we needed something, if something broke or whatever, we could get, they could help us. And so they were great. And Final Cut Pro X, I'm using it now. I've learned how to use it and it's that easy to learn. And I like Final Cut Pro. I watch my Post House. Oh, my Post House. I'll give you 2 Post Houses because I've been using them a lot lately on these other shows I've been doing. And they're just so great. Different by Design, been using them forever. Love them. Matt, terrific. Matt Radecki, he comes in often, speaks in my class.
I know Matt.
Did
he make Marwin Call?
He was a producer on Marwin Call, yeah. Oh, yeah. They're looking forward to that feature coming out. But they're just great. They're busy over there. Oof, they're always busy, but they're great. And the Luke who colored my movie colored Tangerine, and we worked out a way for them to make that less expensive and where it's mostly unsupervised and that kind of thing. And then I worked with a post house, a sound house called Anarchy. Done 2 shows with them now, and they're Dan over there. Love them. They're great. So yeah, that might be my ones.
Cool.
Perfect.
Well, if you want to tell us what you think about our endorsements, about our interview with Mark, if you have any comments or questions for us, please email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. You can also find us on all social media at justshootitpod. I'm on Twitter as @SmiteyPyleg.
And I'm Mr. Matt Enlow. This episode was edited by Jay McCullough. Our producer is Madeline Rosewad, and our webmaster is Ewan Williams. The music you are listening to right now is by the artist Jahzzar and was provided by the Free Music Archive.
Leave us an iTunes review if you can, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone.